have a confession. I messed up. I made a mistake. Hi, I'm Doc Martinez, and welcome to my journey down the old-fashioned rabbit hole. And today we're going to do the OG old-fashioned. You're probably saying, what? Yes, I already made the OG old-fashioned, and I based it upon the recipe on the old-fashioned book by Robert Simonson. I followed the recipe to a T, even finding a recreated version of the Boker's bitters originally used in the original old-fashioned. Now that drink was amazing, and I really enjoyed making and drinking that OG drink. Probably wondering, why a part 2 then? Well, I have a confession. I messed up. I made a mistake. Well, I had ordered both the old-fashioned book by Simonson and the Bartender's Guide by Jerry Thomas at the same time. However, by the time I was ready to start my first OG old-fashioned cocktail, I only had received the old-fashioned book by Simonson. So of course, I used this as a reference for my OG old-fashioned cocktail drink. What happens that a few days after making the original OG video and publishing it, the Jerry Thomas book arrived. Well, of course I was super excited, and I immediately scrolled through the book to look at the original recipe. Well, now, this is where the confusion starts. The whiskey cocktail recipe on page 50 started off the same, but immediately noticed the difference with the bitters. It does not say Boker's bitters as it stated in the old fashioned, but instead it says 2 dashes of bitters Bogarts. What? How can this be? So me, being the genius that I am, decided to go immediately online and look for Bogart's bitters. And with little effort, I was able to find a bottle of Bogart's bitters for sale online. Now, I was a little confused as to how there was a mistake in the print, but I was relieved to find a bottle of Bogart's bitters to buy, and I simply left it at that and waited for the Bogart's bitters to arrive. Cocktail quiz time! How was Boker's bitters used in the printed old-fashioned book by Simonson, and yet the Bartender's Guide by Jerry Thomas had Bogart's bitters printed in its original whiskey cocktail recipe? Gotta stay tuned to find out. Well, with the Bogarts ordered and the crisis averted, I knew that I would have to confess to my original mistake and do an updated OG old-fashioned recipe. So the day finally came when Bogart's bitters by the Bitter Truth arrived. Now this Bogart's bitter was beautifully packaged, and it even came with a little book to tell you the story of Bogart's bitters. However, we'll come back to that story later. Now, for fun, I've decided to do something I've never done before. I'm going to taste both the Boker's and the Bogart's bitters before going on to make the OG old-fashioned part 2. But if you know me, you would know that I am not a big fan of trying new flavors, especially something like this. But let's give it a try. So here we go. Here we have it. The Boker's bitters on the right and the Bogart's bitters by Bitter's Truth on the left. Really quickly, you notice the Boker's has almost no color to it, when the Bogart's is nice and dark. Well, let's see how they smell. Interesting enough, they both smell very similar, with that bitter smell to it. It smells like a little bit of clove in there as well. A little less of that clove smell. Maybe a little bit of anise. Alright, well, let's try them. So here we go. Boker's bitters. Wow. Very strong. Hits you really quickly. Stays on that tongue, especially that middle part of that tongue. It is bitter. Alright, let me clean my palate really quick. Well, that first one's still in there a little bit, but let's try the second one. Here's Bogart's bitters by Bitter's Truth. Wow. Very, very different taste. I don't even know how to describe it. It hits more of the front of the tongue than the middle. Doesn't seem to stay as long, but just as bitter as the first one. Definitely two unique flavors, smell very similar but very unique. Cocktail quiz time. How is Boker's bitters used in the old-fashioned book by Simonson, and yet the Bartender's Guide by Jerry Thomas had Bogart's bitters printed in its original whiskey cocktail? Answer: there is no evidence of any bottles of Bogart's bitters that was ever serviced during Jerry Thomas era, so it is common belief that the Bogart's was a misspelling of Boker's bitters. So now, back to the story of Bogart's bitters. The Bitter Truth was able to acquire an extremely rare bottle of the original Boker's bitters, still containing the genuine remaining contents that were bottled around 1900. So the Bitter Truth spent the last 10 years analyzing, interpreting, and reverse engineering to recreate the authentic bitters from the Jerry Thomas era over a century ago. So in truth, I really didn't mess up, but I should have done more research into the different bitters written in the two books and would have realized it was a typo in the original. And I would not have jumped quickly onto the internet to order a bottle of Bogart's bitters. However, I am glad I did. It is a beautiful bottle with an amazing backstory. So now, let's start making the OG Old Fashioned with Bogart's. And if you'd like more history on the OG Old Fashioned, please check out this video. So here we go, the recipe for what I am calling the OG Old Fashioned cocktail. Ingredients you'll need: whiskey, preferably a rye, Bogart's bitters, gum syrup, and a lemon peel for garnish. How to make the OG Old Fashioned cocktail. Let's start by putting ice in a shaker, not in a glass. Then we'll add 2 dashes of Bogart's bitters, recreated and brought to life by the Bitters Truth. Next, we'll add 1 to 2 bar spoonfuls of gum syrup. Yep, not a sugar cube, but a complex form of sugar syrup made with gum arabic. 2 ounces of whiskey, preferably a rye, in our case Jack Daniel's straight rye whiskey. This mixture is shaken over ice and strained into a wine glass. A squat wine glass would have been used since there were not any old-fashioned glasses back then. And then it is topped with a twist of lemon peel. So here you have it, the OG Old Fashioned, as first written and misspelled in the Bartender's Guide by Jerry Thomas. Another great drink on my journey down the old-fashioned cocktail rabbit hole. Cheers. If you're enjoying these videos, please subscribe and check out the next video on the screen. Thanks.